Hi folks, Tris here. Thanks for listening to Modem Prometheus, and thanks especially to all of you who have joined our Patreon. We don't run ads, so the whole podcast is supported by you. If you'd like to help out, head over to patreon.com/Modem Prometheus. Members get free merch, early access, bonus episodes, and a lot more exciting stuff. Today's story is the conclusion of Going Out by Day, Taking Any Shape Desired to be Taken, and is about finding yourself.
Once, a long time ago, Eliza discovered the Book of the Dead. This was long before the event, long before Thomas, Paul, or Bethany ever featured in her life. It was, in truth, long before she could really understand what the Book of the Dead really was. She'd found it on one of her father's shelves. He was a collector of random knowledge, and his bookshelves bulged with reference guides on geology, anatomy, mathematics and engineering. He had not gone to university, and Eliza had wondered, later, if this building of a library he would never read was some attempt to construct his own. As a child, she had been fascinated with this library. The books full of exploded diagrams of strange machines, maps dividing the country along many different lines, tables of figures she had no reference for. And in the middle of it all, she found this. A slim tome, no diagrams, no pictures. Just a set of instructions, spells they were called, for how to proceed to judgment after death. She'd asked him why he'd bought it once. He'd just said, might be useful one day, as if it were a manual on how to fix a car. On page 13, the book had described how the dead travel, going out by day, taking any shape desired to be taken. She had remembered that her whole life. It had become a mantra, a reminder that she was not fixed in place. She could throw off her old skin and be whatever she wanted. She did not have to be a slave to a job, to a place, to love. She could gather up whatever she didn't like and discard it, a papery, dry husk of her former self. I don't think you can really do that, Paul had said. He'd been wearing a brown suit, one leg curled over the other, and a cigarette in one hand like he thought he was Cary Grant, which, in truth, he probably did. You might tell yourself you have, but there's always something there. Oh, please, she laughed. I've thrown away 3 versions of myself just this week. That was not a lie. Eliza would discard whatever didn't suit her, and did not give it a second thought. When she had first met Thomas, she had been seeing another boy who wore velvet jackets and his hair long, and she had been fond of him. Very fond. At the time, she probably would have described it as love. But Thomas had come along, with his work boots and 5 o'clock shadow and earnestness, a love for the learning he felt unable to be a part of. And she'd liked him, and his mock disdain for the people learning how to not do real work, and the pints he'd drunk in the most aggressively spit and sawdust pubs he could find. Eventually, her fondness for her velvet boy had become inconvenient, so she'd shrugged it off, let it fall off her like a dress at the end of a good date. It had been fun. It had been useful. It was now surplus to requirements. This had not changed after the marriage. A leopard cannot change its spots, except, Eliza thought, I can, and I do, whenever I like. But now her shedding was of smaller things. She had never liked cats, but Thomas wanted one, so she took her distaste and threw it away. She had seen a necklace sitting tempting and glitter bright in a jeweller's window, and she had made comments, dropped hints, and on the morning of their anniversary, Thomas had presented her with a book on ancient Egypt because I know you're interested in that stuff. In someone else, the disappointment might fester, but she had shrugged it off, let it die, gasping on the living room floor, made her smile, unforced. "Look," Paul had said, the third time something similar had happened. "I love Tom. You know I do. But he doesn't do hints. Don't be subtle. If there's a gift you really want, just tell him. It'll be good for both of you. He was worrying about your Christmas present for 3 months last year before he found that dress. I think I was quite obvious." "The evidence," Paul said, "does not agree with you." "Well, it doesn't matter. The dress is lovely. Look at it." "It is. But it's not what you wanted, is it?" "It's not what that version of me wanted," Eliza said. "This version thinks it's divine." And so she walked out into the world, taking any shape she desired to be taken. And every time a skin was shrugged off, it fell into her shadow, which grew a little larger, a little deeper. And if anyone noticed the darkness which followed in her footsteps, then, well, they didn't say anything. And then, of course, there was the event. It wasn't that she ever regretted choosing Thomas. He wasn't perfect, but who was? He remained a beautiful, supportive man who worked steadily while she studied for her doctorate. No. What she regretted was having to choose at all. It was hard to believe Paul had grown up on the same estate, with his vintage suits, pointy shoes and witty asides delivered over a cocktail. Where Paul had thrown off his roots, Thomas had wrapped himself in them. Paul refused to believe he'd thrown anything off. "No," he'd said. "I don't discard anything. I couldn't. That estate's still in my bones. I wouldn't be me without it." They were so different. It was surprising they were friends. Paul had gone to university. Thomas had apprenticed himself to an electrician. Thomas played football. Paul played chess. Thomas drank pints and ate scampi fries from a packet torn open on the bar. Paul went to see the Royal Philharmonic, playing Bach, and sipped on a gin and tonic in the interval. What they had in common, perhaps the only thing they had in common, was an attraction to Eliza. And while Paul never acted on this, being outwardly at least as taken with Bethany as Thomas was with her, she had been able to tell, and she had started to wonder. And so, one night, with Thomas out of town, and a bottle of wine split between them, Eliza shrugged off the part of herself that worried about what Thomas would think, and Paul lacked the will to resist. "I think this was a mistake," he'd said afterward. Eliza stretched out on the bed, gloriously naked, feeling like a goddess. "Are you sure?" she'd said. "I think I was far too loud to entirely agree with you. Bethany's going to be devastated. She doesn't need to know." "Sorry," he'd said, picking up his shirt. "She does." If only I'd known back then, Eliza thought, that one day I'd be a parakeet, hunting my old body through the realm of the dead so I can be properly judged. Would I have done anything differently, knowing this was coming? Probably not. Throwing off her cares was always her way of making her heart lighter. As she flies, she sees the Shadow Wolf's cage. Some of the bars have been peeled open, and it sits there empty. The wolf is loose. No time to think about that. She cannot see her body, but she doesn't need to. It pulls to her. She can find her way to it as easily as a migrant returning for the summer. But the place it's pulling her is strange. Her body is both here and not here, pulled into a world that exists in parallel, somewhere that overlays both the living and the dead. And this means she needs a doorway, an empty crossroads at sunset, An alley that only exists on every third Wednesday. The space between raindrops. She flies toward where the clouds are darkening, looking for lightning, readying her approach. And then the wolf is on her. She shrieks as its teeth snap at her tail feathers, but it only succeeds in tearing a few away before Eliza twists through its grip. She pushes herself desperately into the building storm. "You cannot trap me here," the wolf says. "There is no light here." It begins to rain, huge, heavy drops that fall like shipwrecks, knocking into Eliza's wings and throwing her off balance. The wolf lunges. Eliza pushes herself upwards, then folds her wings and dives, following the pull of her skin through the twisting forest of drops until she feels the world catch like a seam just starting to unpick. When the wolf's jaws snap again, she is gone. There is no rain in the back roads. There is no sun. There is not really any weather at all, just a dull orange glow of streetlight and buildings which are lit far brighter than they should be. Eliza feels strange here. Her body fizzes when she moves, and shrugging off her skin to prowl the streets as a cat feels less like slipping from satin sheets and more like tugging on Velcro. She knew about the back roads, of course, much like she knew about late-night warehouse raves and corporate takeover meetings. Awareness is not the same as experience. Now she is here, she does not like the uncomfortable landscape. The houses crowd her in, too many of them trying to squeeze into the same space. She passes a garden full of carnivorous plants that turn to face her as she passes, sap dripping from their flowers. A bloody dog's paw lies on the path. More than this, though, she does not like the intrusive thoughts that have been bubbling up since she crossed the divide. Nothing can lie in the back roads, not even to itself. And Eliza is hearing her own brain whisper, "Selfish child." I was 78, she thinks. A 78-year-old child, her brain replies. Take the things you want. Ignore the consequences. Throw away any experience you might have learned from. You never once gave change to a beggar. You took the sight of them and shrugged it off. You can't help everyone. You didn't help anyone. She forces the thoughts down, holding them like a lid on an overflowing pot. Her body is pulling her harder the closer she gets. The back roads seem empty, though she knows they are not. She can feel herself being watched. In the distance, a moped engine accelerates. She finds herself at a temple. Much like her own pyramid, it sits incongruous. A solid sandstone trapezoid among office blocks. Hieroglyphs decorate the walls, but she doesn't look at them too closely. The way they move is disturbing, like they were pinned down while still alive. There are two huge statues, one on either side of the doorway. Their hands rest on their laps. Their faces are gone, only scratch marks remaining, like they were clawed away by a sphinx. Inside, she finds herself in an antechamber. Cats lounge on every surface, but she doesn't see Pepsi in the throng. A few turn to look at her, but most ignore her. And at the far side of the room, standing in a far smaller doorway, is her body. Possibly it's the strange backroads light, but it also seems to cast no shadow. She runs toward it, calling, "Come on, we've got to go." Her body just stands there. Eliza stops in front of it and glares upward. "I I said move! Her body tilts its head down toward her. To say it looked would be untrue. The part of it that looked, that saw, that had a self to see, is all sat in the little cat before it. But it faces in her direction before turning away and walking down the passage. And Eliza realizes it's not her body anymore. It has a new owner. She follows it into a far larger room, which holds the others. One with horns curled like a ram stands silent and muscular in a corner, hands resting on a large club. Two smaller ones, naked and beautiful with dragonfly wings, buzz her with scratchy, chattering laughs as she enters. There are more. Tall, short, medusoid, twisted, hideously attractive, wonderfully ugly. And they all look at the dais, on which sits a stone throne, and on that there is another, possibly the most beautiful face Eliza has ever seen, on top of a torso she would once have killed for. But the limbs are spindle sticks, 3 times as long as they should be, with more joints than she's comfortable with. Her body climbs jerkily onto the platform and points its face at the floor. The thing on the throne looks at her. "I do not agree," it says. Eliza blinks at it. As she does, she feels knowledge of its name flow into her. This is the spider. She isn't sure how this helps. With what? With you. I haven't said anything? The thing peers at her, leans forward closer than it should be able to. It looks annoyed. Why not? Eliza's tail swishes nervously from side to side, and she can feel Pepsi laughing. No cat would allow itself to be talked to like this. She plants herself, tail held under one paw to stop the twitching. "You have my body," she says. "I would like it back." "Ah," the thing says. It seems happier now. "That was it. I still do not agree." Eliza looks at her body, which stands zombie-like next to the dais. "It's right there." "Oh no," the thing says. "It is, indeed. That is correct. I disagree that you would like it back. You have hated it for years. You far prefer being unencumbered with the guilt and memories it drags around behind it." Eliza huffs. It was going to be a sigh, but some things you cannot do when you are a cat. Yes, I do. But I need it. Why? So I can be judged, and then pass on. And where will you go? To the field of reeds, where the sun always shines and the wheat grows well? Or to the pen of Amit, to watch your heart crushed between her teeth? Amit, Eliza says instantly, and stops. No. She tries to say, the field of reeds. Tries over and over, but you cannot lie here. Not even to yourself. Well. The thing reaches idly across the room and snatches one of the dragonfly-winged others from the air. Without any ceremony, it tears off a leg and thoughtfully sucks on the top like a child with an ice pop. Isn't that interesting? Eliza says. She cannot find words for the rest of the sentence. You do not understand, the thing says. You cannot. You are too shallow like this. You are a puddle of yourself. Eliza sputters. It was one time. I slept with him once. I apologised. Her body looks up and stares at the far wall. It is not the sex which damns us, it says. That is not the transgression. That is a symptom. The transgression is the pain we caused without caring. Bethany cried herself to sleep for weeks, and we knew. Paul slept on their sofa until she was willing to let him touch her again. He felt her pain. We threw it away. We saw Thomas's pain, but caring was hard, so we threw that away too. I told Thomas I was sorry, but we were not. We believed we were entitled to forgiveness and felt aggrieved when it was not given. I loved him. And he left me. They all left me. Am I not allowed a single mistake? We did love him, but we did not care if we hurt him. They left you because they knew. The spider chews meditatively on the leg. The wounded other is still pale and whimpering on the floor. I can see why you wish to be judged, it says, and also hunted. It is looking toward the far door, and Eliza follows its gaze, expecting to see the shadow wolf melting into reality. But there is nothing. It is not there, the spider says, but it comes. It is your fear, your doubt, your guilt, the things you had no use for and did not realize remain stuck to the soles of your shoes. It pauses. In death, as in life, it is all about you. I like that. I appreciate it. It waves an arm languidly. Take your body. This was a fine entertainment. You will find passage to your judgment waiting outside. Eliza is silent as she walks through the passages of the Things Temple. She does not trust what she might say in this place. Her body ambles after her, slow and stupid. You were no help, she thinks. Outside, the back roads have changed, as if the temple moved itself while she was inside. Now she exits onto the canal, at which is waiting an unmanned narrowboat. Her body climbs aboard and mans the tiller. Eliza sits awkwardly next to it as they putter slowly away. As they travel, the sulphurous tint of the back roads recedes, and with it, the thoughts Eliza has been trying to keep down. It's a nonsense, she mutters to herself. If Thomas wanted an affair, he could have had one. I wanted him to be happy. He could have picked any woman he wanted, and I wouldn't have cared. He could have slept with Bethany. He clearly wanted to. She glares at her body, daring it to disagree, but it just sits there, hand on the tiller, and stares blankly ahead. The temple is approaching. She doesn't remember it being by the canal, but maybe geography in this world is just as fungible as it is in the back roads. We'll see, she says. I'll get your useless ass up those stairs, and then I'll be judged, and that'll prove I did nothing wrong. The boat pulls in. Her body ties it up to a docking post, and together they head up the stairs, Eliza bounding, her body shambling along behind. Yesterday and tomorrow sit silently on their plinths, but the door is open, inviting. She has almost reached it when the shadow wolf pads out. It steams in the overcast daylight, but is not dissipating. If anything, it seems to be growing deeper. Move, Eliza growls. "Gladly," says the wolf, and leaps at her. Eliza springs to the side with an easy agility, and the wolf flies through the space where she was and hammers into her body, which is still stupidly climbing the stairs, entirely unaware of its surroundings. The wolf rights itself before it tumbles, but her body is sent falling all the way back down the staircase. No! Eliza dashes past the wolf to where her body lies dazed. It is grazed and bloody, but responsive, and blankly turns to face her when she headbutts it. The wolf snarls from its perch several steps up and prepares to leap. Eliza hisses at it and starts to shrug off her skin to be a lion, but finds herself captured. Her body has pushed itself upright, has picked Eliza up, and is holding her tight. "What?" she snaps. "No! Stop it!" Her body ignores her and begins to push Eliza into itself. She struggles and protests, but it's like pushing against a mountain. And Eliza, the whole Eliza, body and soul, opens her eyes. She looks at her bruised and grazed arms. Ow! Arthritic joints complain as she climbs the stairs. The wolf looks on, confused. As Eliza passes it, she snaps her fingers at it, pointing at her heel. "Come on, you too." It whines and follows her, losing its own shape and gaining hers, sticking itself to her shoes, and Eliza once again casts a shadow. Yesterday and tomorrow ignore her as she passes into the anteroom of her life story, and then into the smaller chamber where the robed figure is waiting. "So," it says, "you made it, eventually." "I did." "Are you ready to be judged?" "No." "No?" "No." Eliza folds her arms. "I'm not doing this. I've done good things. I've done bad things too, I accept that. I didn't care for people like I should have done. But my life was not an exam. What right do you have to judge me?" The robe gives a slight chuckle. "You're right. Only one person has the right to judge you." And it pulls down its hood, and Eliza sees her own face staring back. Me. Eliza stares at herself. What? Her mirror sighs and walks slowly back behind the desk. It sits down carefully to avoid angering old hips. "Do you know why you're here? This doesn't happen for most people. When it's their time, they just get on the night bus and pass on. Static, signal, whatever toasts their muffin. But not you. You needed validation. You needed to be told you were good. That's all this is, Eliza Delacour. Desperately trying to convince herself she deserved paradise." Eliza slumps. "I didn't mean to hurt people. Truly, I didn't. I know." Her mirror self shrugs. "I was there. That might even be enough." The desk shifts, flowing like water and reforming into a giant pair of scales. Eliza's mirror self is suddenly standing, and on one pan places a parakeet feather. "Do you think it will be?" "I don't know." "Me neither." Her mirror shoves a hand into Eliza's chest and pulls out her heart. It sits in her hand, dripping, red, and beating. Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-dum. Let's find out.
Modem Prometheus is written by Neil Murton. The voice of the city is Kate Angier, with music and production by me, Tris Oaten. For free merch, bonus episodes, and behind-the-scenes content, support us at patreon.com/Modem Prometheus. If you're not ready for that kind of commitment, please rate and review us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you're listening to this right now. The final story of this season is due on the moon of the lost hour, the 25th of March. Remember, you can be who you choose to be. Your options are heart or feather.